Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sync Up Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things OneDrive. OneDrive is the home for all of the files that you care about most, and we are here to take you behind the scenes to get the insights and the knowledge to make your experience and your users' experiences better. My name is Stephen Rice, and I'm a Principal Product Manager on the OneDrive team, and I am joined by my fellow OneDrive aficionado, Arvind Mishra.
Hello, everyone. I'm Arvind Mishra, and I'm also a Principal Product Manager on the OneDrive team. Today, we've got a great set of discussions and topics, including a behind-the-scenes look at the development of the new design of OneDrive's visual refresh, as well as a really awesome feature in the area of personalization. I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet, but you're going to hear about it in just a second. So if you love design, if you love craft, this is the episode for you. We're joined this week by Christopher Weimer and Lindsay Gill. Weimer and Gill. It sounds like a law firm or a very fancy seafood restaurant. Hey, Christopher, we'll start with you. One, tell us where you're coming from. And two, tell us about your role at Microsoft.
I am currently in Ohio, just outside of Cleveland, about 15 minutes in a small little town, village actually, called Valley View. I'm a principal designer with Microsoft, and I've been on the OneDrive team now for about 9 years.
Wow, that is a long time. What about you, Lindsay?
Yeah, I'm in the Redmond area, so pretty close to headquarters over here. And I am a senior designer, and I've been on the team for about 6 years.
Nice. I would imagine this time of year, Seattle and Ohio have very similar weather patterns.
It's pretty sunny here. How about Ohio?
Yeah, it's pretty sunny here. I mean, I would say the only difference between the two places in summer is the humidity.
Like you get a lot of it out there in Ohio.
Yeah. That's why I currently am running 3 dehumidifiers in my house at any given time.
Excellent. And Lindsay, probably you don't even have air conditioning in your house, I would imagine.
I just have a little portable one, but someday it'd be nice to have central AC.
There you go. Well, welcome to both of you.
Yeah, I'm so excited for this episode. But before we get into kind of the meat of the discussion, we want to have a little fun with an icebreaker question for our guests. Sometimes these are serious, sometimes they're fun. So a good way to kind of see how we're all feeling today. Now, Weimer, Lindsay, you are both amazing designers. You're experts in your field. You've got a wealth of knowledge, practical, theoretical, on how to make the most beautiful, the most functional interfaces in the history of software design on this planet. With this background, Arvind and I need to know, what is the best color? Weimer, do you want to start?
A very hard question, because my default answer is like every color. I love every color. And I would say the best color is whatever's right for the job at the time. I don't discriminate against any color. I can make mauve work. I can make, deep purple work. I can make any kind of color work. But my favorite personal color is like somewhere in the seafoam green to blue ratio.
See, that's like such a nuanced answer. Like I'm thinking like there's red and then there's orange and then yellow. And I'm trying to remember the rest of the rainbow. Lindsay, what are you? Do you have an opinion on the best color here?
If you were to have asked my high school self, I probably would have said hot pink and lime green. That's not the case anymore. I love those 80s colors, and I think over the years I've toned down a bit. But I do have a favorite color right now, and I don't have a specific name for it, but it's like a light, dusty blue. And I like it for anything, like the shirts I wear or anything that I use in design and, more personal design work. But blue is also very calming, which I think we all need these days.
Also the color of the OneDrive logo, which is a point in your favor. So Lindsay, I think you picked the correct best color because you were closer.
You're the winner.
Woohoo!
I got a funny question for both of you. So in life, there are all kinds of things that people will recommend and be like, oh, this is the best thing ever. And you should try it. Or this is the best thing I've ever seen. And you got to see it. I would love to know, in your opinion, and this could be like a service, it could be an app, it could be a piece of media, like a movie, a television show, whatever. What is something, in your opinion, that is totally worth the hype?
And you can't say OneDrive is the only caveat.
Yeah, it's like that's of course.
I mean, I can start. There's an obvious answer. Arvind, you probably know what I'm going to say. Star Wars is obviously the thing. It's not overhyped. It's just amazing. You should go and watch Star Wars.
Over and over again.
When we started this show, Arvind, I wanted to try and sneak Star Wars in every episode. I feel like I failed the last couple, but here's my plug for this one. So
ding, ding.
Go watch Star Wars.
You know, it's funny you say that because I think that's the first thing that came to mind. And I did not grow up watching Star Wars, but just the past few years I have been, and I love Andor. I think a lot of people love it, so it's not new, but it's a really great show.
Are you looking forward to Ahsoka coming out in August?
Yes, I watched all of Clone Wars and got to know her, so excited for Ahsoka to come out.
Such a great character.
We are like half an inch away from my other podcast that I do. Maybe I'll plug it at the end of this episode. I normally don't, but like, if you want more Star Wars podcast content, have I got the show for you?
Perfect.
What about you, Christopher?
Sticking with the show theme, I'm the worst at people give me recommendations and then like I'll sit on them for a year at a time. And another designer friend that I had from college was over and he's like, oh, you got to check out like White Lotus and the Bear. Like this was like a year ago. And he was like, oh, you need to check these out. And I literally sat on them both for probably a good 8 months. And then I managed to watch all of them both back to back, like in 2 weeks time frame because I loved them. I'm like, I just need to start listening to people when they give me recommendations. But I'm like, I don't know. I just want to be like, I don't want to watch it right away because then I feel like I'm buying into the hype. But those are both very good.
Nice. I would say White Lotus. There is no show crazier than White Lotus, especially the first season. The way everything came together in the end, it was just I can't think of a show that ends that crazily, if that's even a word. So
I have not seen it yet. I'll move it up my list of shows to watch. So this is good. This is good feedback.
You got to see it. You got to see it. It's so good. I'd say on my end, I'll stick with the entertainment theme that we've got going on here. I would say I was pleasantly surprised at how good Hamilton was live. I know that's like sort of dated because it was like, oh, it was popular a couple of years ago, but like I remember everybody was going crazy for it. I was like, how good could this possibly be? I saw it not even with, like the real cast or whatever. I saw it with like a traveling cast. Honestly, it was so good. The crowd was so into it. The music was great. Like, very touching. I think all the actors, they were the original ones, they were all really good. And to this day, I was like, I almost don't want to see it again because I don't think it'll be as good as when I saw it the first time. Well, that's enough of this nonsense. I hope you guys are sufficiently warmed up. Let's get to talking about OneDrive's visual refresh. As everyone knows, has been listening to our podcast for the last couple episodes, we are in the midst of a sea change with OneDrive and how it looks and how it functions. And today we're just going to talk about the visuals. And so I would love to hear about how we started with the entire OneDrive Gen 3 or OneDrive new visual system. How did it all come about? I'll start with you, Weimer.
I think it all came out of we did a track. Yeah, about 6 months ago, 7 months ago, I forget. We did this track that was basically called OneDrive 2025, and the point of it was if we step back and look at what OneDrive could be 5 years out, 3 years out, and we didn't put any limitations on it, what could that be? And by limitations, I mean from a visual standpoint, it was more around. We have a design system at Microsoft called Fluent, and if we look at Fluent where it stood today, but then kind of leapfrogged it and kind of predicted where it might go, and also like if we could kind of influence it even more, where it would go. And so we started out there, and then we basically ran a couple sprints where we just let our imagination run wild, and we just kind of drew whatever came to mind from a visual aspect. So some of the ideas at first were really kooky, where we would basically just take what is OneDrive today and break it all apart and kind of reorder it, restack it, get rid of things like the notion of a side navigation, and like how do we kind of like streamline that, and if we could take the ideas and concepts that are there, but like take them to the nth degree. That was basically 2025, and with that we kind of did it all, and then we kind of scaled back. So we got all the crazy ideas out there, and then we kind of scaled it back, and then we took those ideas and kind of then transitioned it into experiences. So not so much the visual, but how can we apply all those visuals and some of these ideas and seedlings into experiences for the customer? And that was a little bit of like how it started. And from that, basically was so well received that we decided to build it. And that turned into the OD3 effort.
Yeah, I remember seeing some of the output from that kind of 2025 vision effort. And I think the number one response from everyone we showed it to, or like from me and from others, I wasn't the one showing it, but was great, 2025. How do we make that 2023? I'm always amazed when we subtract 2 years off of a vision, but it is so cool to see. What were some of the kind of outside influences on the team that really informed the design here?
Yeah, I think I'll speak to mine, and then maybe Lindsay has a different way of thinking about it. But like for me, it was kind of looking at everything. It was kind of looking at what people use in their day-to-day life and what made that so different than what OneDrive was. And how did we kind of bring some of those things into that experience that didn't feel so commercial, that felt more friendly, that felt like we could approach it and streamline it and make it something that people came in and didn't feel intimidated to use. So I was looking at a whole bunch of other things that were good for personally for me to use and in my day-to-day life, what felt good to use, what were some things that were streamlined, and also just kind of looking what was out there. So that's how I got inspiration.
Yeah, I'd say, Weimer was talking about when we first started visioning everything out, we kind of just started from ground zero and broke everything out. And we looked at so many different apps, what inspired us. And I'd say the things that stuck out to me were things that were playful, but also lightweight. I can give some examples. Like, I don't know if you've ever used the Carrot weather app, but that's a pretty playful, funny app. And, we're not going that extreme, but it was fun to look at things like that just to inspire us. And then things that are lightweight, I think of like Milanote. I don't know if you ever used Milanote, but pretty lightweight way to organize different pieces of information. So yeah, I'd say playful and lightweight were what inspired me.
I'm curious, like when you say carrot and, doing things fun, or maybe even I would say whimsical, like did you actually draw like, OneDrive, if it was this whimsical experience? Did you do executions like that?
I'd say maybe almost 2 years ago, we had this design sprint. It was called Personalization and Expression Design Sprint. And I think at that point, we did draw a lot of these really whimsical things. And, of course, we don't go with all of it. But, and it wasn't as crazy as Carrot. But, if we let ourselves play around a bit.
Tell me about something that, like, within that whimsical space or in that, like, left on the cutting room floor space that you were like, oh my God, I'm truly amused by this, or I'm truly like floored by this. Tell us about something that didn't get built, but you were like, this is kind of funny or kind of interesting.
So there's this view we would really like to build called spatial organization or spatial view, where you can basically organize your files however you want. It doesn't have to just be a grid of folders or a grid of files. You can move it into a colored square, or you can layer them on top, sort of like, Windows desktop. You can just move it wherever you want. And you can drag and drop things onto it, or maybe bring an attachment in. And it's a lot more fluid than it is now. And I think that would be really cool if we could do that someday. And we drew that up.
Cool. I think I've seen drawings of that. It's sort of like a Figma board, basically, that's inside of a folder kind of view. Yeah. That's cool. I could see how if you were dealing with a lot of different types of media for a particular project, it would be a very useful view for some. I'm sure there are other scenarios, but that's where my brain sort of went to. So
another kind of question for you both, like our team is obviously based a lot in customer research, user studies, jobs to be done, got all the buzzwords for product development. One of the things I think that was really unique about this kind of visual refresh, it was very much a design-driven project. It started out of this kind of sprint that the design team ran, very focused on just the visual language of the product. And I kind of wanted to pick both of your brains. Like, what was it like having such a heavy design-driven sort of project here?
It's a little intimidating at first, like because there's kind of everyone's looking at you, and they're like, "Okay, you guys are in the driver's seat now. What do you want us to do?" And that's really a first for me. Even I've been here, like I said, for almost 10 years now, and it's the first time that design has had that much kind of influence over the final result, where it really was, "Hey, we know you guys can draw a lot of good things and really precise drawings, and they look great, but like, can we translate that into the product. And we want you to basically put the pressure on us to make sure that it looks as good in the final product as it does in the drawings. It kind of felt like we had this magic wand that we could, go and kind of tap on people and say, okay, like this is what we need from you. And can you do this? And people would just, do it. And everyone was bought into that, which was a really good feeling. There wasn't these moments of like, well, like we'd love to do that for you, but we can't. It was more of like, okay, yes, let's go and do that. And it was a really amazing experience. It was also really nice because everyone was kind of in it from the beginning, which is another first, like where so many times it kind of goes in these cycles of like passing the baton off to other teams or other individuals, and then it kind of goes back around. And this was the first time that it was like everyone kind of had their hands on the baton and we were all kind of going in the race together. And that was really, really interesting and fun experience.
Yeah, I've been part of many, many conversations where we've done kind of exactly that. Like design draws something, we talk about it with PM. PM's like, actually, you wanted these rounded corners, and rounded corners adds 3 months of engineering time, so never mind. Go back to square corners. Not a real example, but probably too close to some of those sometimes. I really love the quality bar we set here and that design set of like, no, like we have a vision for what OneDrive in 2025 and now OneDrive in 2023 should look like. And that is what we're going to ship. And having that clarity and direction across the entire organization of like, nope, like this isn't a place to cut corners, square corners, but a place to like actually land that polish and craft and vision. And I think it's pretty amazing how it came out. I'm really excited for it.
Yeah. I know as designers, we can sometimes get wrapped up in the most smallest details. And sometimes it can be very annoying. And as a designer, I know that.
We would never say that.
No, of course not. No. It's called being thorough. But it was nice also in that terms of like, there was a real conscious effort to make sure that those little details weren't overlooked this time, or that, when a designer says, I need this 8 pixels away, that it was 8 pixels away, not 10. And that was very nice because it felt like people gave us a lot of trust and they felt like that we had the best intentions going into it. And it was nice to just feel that from the entire group of like, okay, we trust you to give us the vision and to go and execute it.
That's awesome. I love hearing that like this was like this incredible joint process where like design was, sort of in the driver's seat and was able to essentially inspire the entire, product and division to where it's like everyone saw what you guys built and it was like, yeah, I want that. Except we want it tomorrow. So a lot of what we're talking about or we're going to be talking about, it's content or it's experiences that are going to be coming out over the next couple of months. And so obviously our listening audience can't see all of this today. So I'd love it, like Lindsay or Weimer, if y'all could describe for our audience, like what are these exciting new changes that are going to be coming to the OneDrive product?
I'll speak on it from the emotional aspect of it, or the intangible things. That is visual design. I think the things that we're bringing to the product is a sense of calmness and removing all the barriers from it that get in the way when we look at the product as it currently has stood. We removed a lot of geometry from the page so that when people come into it, they know exactly where they need to go. And we're basically creating structure through space and through the changing of colors, the use of depth in certain aspects of it so that it draws focus to your content. Things that you don't use a lot of, we're trying to recede back in the space so that when you are trying to get stuff done, you're focused on the things that matter to you, not the left nav, not the commanding at the top. There was a real sense of right place, right time, right volume with all this work. And so we're trying to instill that if something doesn't need to be there in that moment, let's get rid of it. Let's bring it back when the user or the customer really needs it. So very contextual commanding, very contextual rhythm of the design so that things just come easy. Like to Lindsay's point earlier, like we want things to just be easy. We don't want you to have to come in and try to figure a whole bunch of stuff out. We just want you to come in and start and being able to hit the ground running once you come in. So that's one aspect. And then also just like bringing a softness and a playfulness, not in the sense that like we have, vibrancy going on everywhere. It's more of, we make things rounder. We give things more space, which is something that up until a couple of years ago in the commercial space would have been seen as like, heresy. You're not using my space efficiently. But I think over the past couple of years, people have learned that just because we're taking up more space doesn't mean we're using it inefficiently. We're basically creating space so that you can see your content better, so that you can browse easier, so that your eyes aren't hurting by 3 hours into your workday. There's a real attention to making sure that things feel light and I can traverse through the spaces very calmly.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you described that really speaks to me is like you talked about making it easy to use, lighter. Those are all things that sound easy to do and are deceptively hard, I think. Like there's a lot of engineering and thought that has to go into making something not cluttered and easy to find. We've talked a lot on the podcast with we 2 episodes ago now, we talked with Lesha, who had talked about kind of new OneDrive home, the people in meetings view, and this kind of like time to file metric. How do we get people to their content as fast as possible? And I love that a lot of the changes you're describing are all about it's harder to find your files when you've got a cluttered desk, which definitely looks like what my desk looks like right now. Like you can't find things. Lindsay, can you talk a little bit about what are some of the changes we've made or colors that we're using that are some of your favorite pieces?
One thing that I really think about is at the top of the UI, we used to have this blue bar, and we're taking that out. So now it's just a white background. And we're also rounding the corners of the search bar at the top. There's also a big new button that is a cool blue gradient. And so there's a lot of these little details, and Weimer was, basically designed all of this. And so he could probably speak more to it. But those are the things that stand out to me a lot, is just these little details that add up to create more lightweight and fun and dynamic experience. And so I think, some of those little gradients and just taking away those big blocks of color just really helps create that more lightweight feeling.
Yeah. So you mentioned the kind of big new button. What does the button do?
So when you click it, it's on the upper left side. There's a little flyout that drops down and you can create a new folder or a new file, similar to what you can do now, but it's a bit more prominent, so you can get to it a lot easier.
Gotcha. So it's a new button.
It is a new button.
Okay, got it. I'm clear on it now.
I love how you described the feelings that we're trying to evoke with our customers, with like the focus and the sense of calm and a little bit of playfulness. But there's a lot of fit and finish inside of the product. I know like Steven was joking about things like rounded corners and whatnot in there, but like there's a lot of cool stuff from iconography to the rounded corners to drop shadows. And why do you care so much, Weimer? Why is this stuff in the product?
I think it's one of those things that people don't know they need it till they see it. With good design, great design, actually, people don't know it's great design. They just know they like it. But people can spot bad design in a millisecond. If it is clunky and bad, like they will be the first to tell you. You won't hear a word when people like your design. Like that's the success, is when nobody talks about it because it just feels right. Part of that is getting to the fit and finish. Like I was joking earlier about like, eight pixels instead of 10, but those 2 pixels make a difference, because if something is 2 pixels off and not lining up the right way, I will get an email from everyone talking about like, hey, this looks like it's off. Can you take a look at it? I'm like, yep, it is off. But it's that attention to detail that really elevates the product. And it's the things that people will just feel, it makes them feel calm. If something's off and people can sense that it's off, it'll drive them nuts. It's like anyone that's, has walked into a house and they see a picture frame and it's tilted just slightly to one side. and it's all you think about the entire time you're at that person's house. You're like, is it rude for me to just go and fix that frame real quick?
You've never been to my house, Weimer. How do you know about all of the crooked pictures?
Because it happens at my house, because I have a 5-year-old that loves to just fiddle. It's those little things like the gradient, like the removing the blue from the header. You don't notice it until it's gone. And then you're like, oh, wow, this feels so much better. I didn't know that big blue bar at the top was something that was giving me like angst. And I always felt like I was ducking when I would come into OneDrive. That's why we care.
It's like we're throwing things at you.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why we care about craft, is because it'll drive us nuts to begin with, and it's something that we have to do as designers to feel calm.
I love the way you articulated that. I mean, it's like walking into a room that on a slight slant. You can't tell what's going on, but something feels off, and this just feels right.
I want to peel the curtain back a little bit. Obviously, our design process, subject to change, everything changes because that's how, product development works. Can you both talk about like, what is the process for our team? Like, how did you maintain that level of craft? What did it look like? Some of them, what are the key meetings or discussions that happen in order to land that level of detail in the product?
So we met about twice a week for a few months together as a design team, and we also had PM and other key partners join in. And we started with an audit. We audited what our current product or the last iteration looked like. We really got into the nitty gritties, like what are all the bugs we can find? What are all of the poor experiences we can find, but also the good ones that we want to keep. We started with an audit, and then we looked at inspiration. At one point we did how might we statements, how might we, do X, Y, and Z? How do we want to improve the product? And then we started doing ideation and concepting. There were assignments. We divvied out a lot of these different challenges that we saw and assigned it to people. Weimer was the mastermind behind the visuals of it, all of the UI changes. And so he did a lot of work to get that ready for the rest of us. Cause then we took that frame and we took it and built UX flows on top of that. We took what he did and we ran with it with all the different things that we wanted to solve. So that was kind of the meeting cadence that we did.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about like the implementation and like how we got it into the product. And, obviously we had some meetings. I worked with a great PM and a couple engineers. But honestly, once we got like the hard date of when we needed to kind of have the first iteration of this in code, that's when we kind of started off like with a regular meeting cadence, but then it slowly turned into like me and another engineer just like, ad hoc meetings about every, hour and a half. And we would just sit there and we would just noodle on things. And honestly, it worked out better that way. Like, that's another thing about this process that worked really well, is that there was a great partnership between myself and engineers when we were getting the stuff into the product of, hey, we want to do this right. And sometimes, a normal scheduled meeting isn't enough time, or it feels too buttoned up, that it feels better to just be like, hey, you bring up your Figma, I'll bring up the code, and let's just sit there and compare and just talk through it. And so that's kind of what we did. And, Figma is great for pictures, but sometimes the code acts different and you kind of have to on the spot make changes and figure out how, okay, this doesn't work. And how can we go over top of this? And so that's kind of what and I'll give a shout out to Vitaly. He was basically my right-hand man through most of it. That's what we did. And his level of detail and making sure that things look the way that sometimes he would be like, hey, this doesn't look like how you drew it. I was like, oh yeah, it doesn't. Like, thanks for that catch. Like he had a vested level of interest that equaled mine in the craft portion of it. So that was amazing.
Yeah, I just love that attention to detail. And obviously, like I'm excited for everyone to get a peek at the results. I know we'll plug this again at the end, but you both have been writing a blog that will come out later this month that will also talk and show off a lot of these changes. You can visualize it. But I want to transition us into our second topic. Arvin, you teased it as personalization. And I'm going to start with a story, and I'll kind of hand it over to both of you to start talking about it. So one of the key moments I remember as a PM is I went to the Bellevue School District, so a school district kind of near the Microsoft campus. I was a guest speaker for a class of tech students, high school students. And then I met after school with a group just to kind of understand how they use Microsoft products at school, what the students do and that kind of thing. And one of the things they talked about is the school wanted them all to use the Windows 32 version of the OneNote app instead of the Universal Windows Platform or the UWP version of the OneNote app. And the students had gone out of their way to try and hack their way around this school app store platform because they wanted UWP OneNote because they had more pen colors. That was the killer feature for all of these students to use OneNote. And this specific version of OneNote is it had 8 pen colors instead of 4 or whatever it is. And that brings us to colored folders. That was the moment to me. I was oh, people really care about coloring their stuff. They're like children. I don't know why. Lindsay, you were kind of one of the premier designer behind colored folders. Where did we start? What was the impetus for making colored folders part of OneDrive?
I think that's a pretty universal thing that everybody wants because adults want that too. It's been a big customer ask for more than a decade, and it's been on our backlog for a long time. So definitely, we've gotten that feedback and we're trying to meet people's needs there. And it's also just fun. We're working 8 or more hours a day. Why not give more personalization and infuse some fun into the work that we do and more opportunities to help organize your things?
I love the fact that colored folders also have a very practical use, right? Okay, they're fun. You can customize your desktop, but you can also do interesting scenarios color all the invoices or something and put them into a red folder, for example. For our audience, can you describe what the experience is ultimately going to be like when they're using it, when they're creating them?
When you click that new button and then you click create folder, currently you can just name your folder, but under that, we're going to have 16 colors that you can choose from directly in that create folder dialog. And so you can do it there. You can also, there's that little more button in the list view where there's that overflow menu that comes out. You can either go to rename and do that there, or there's a change color feature and that pops out another area to change the color too. So pretty straightforward. Few different ways to do it.
That is awesome. So you mentioned 16 colors. That's a very specific number. How did we choose the colors?
I'll start with the number of colors. I began by drawing 8 to 10 colors, just trying to make sure that there was some, red, orange, yellow, all the colors of the rainbow. And then we brought it to a research study and we asked people, what do you think of this color palette? And then we showed them one that had a lot more to them. And overwhelmingly, people wanted more colors, just like to your story. They want to be able to organize. And maybe, you take a dark blue and make that your primary folder. And then maybe within that, you have lighter blue, or maybe the dark and light mean different things. And so decided to go with 8 colors and then do a dark and a light version of each of those. So we'll have, dark green, dark orange, light orange. There will just be one yellow. We won't have, dark yellow and light yellow, but just one yellow and then also a gray. So that makes up 16. When it comes to the palette, that was definitely a journey. I have a whole page in my Figma with probably a month's worth of different palette explorations, but I, made sure that there was one color in each hue category. And then I took the blue color that we have from the logo and then took the yellow, legacy folder color that we have, and then kind of made those I based all the colors off of those two and made sure that there was enough balance in the tone between all of them. And then I also wanted to bring gradients into the mix as well, kind of to match with that new button. So instead of currently there's a little bit of an overlay and a gradient in the current yellow folders that we have, but wanted to up level that a bit. So now we have it going from a darker orange to a slightly lighter orange in the gradient of the folder itself.
So much more deep. You just use so many words. I don't know what a hue tone is or any of these things. I just know that I like the colored folders.
I learned a lot too. Yeah.
I was going to say, this is why I'm not a designer. If it was up to me to pick the colors, I would have like gone to Target and gotten the 128, carton of Crayola crayons and been like, here are our colors, #ship it. Weimer, on the subject of colored folders, like, how does this all fit into the overall design language that you were talking about earlier?
Basically, me and Lindsay had to partner and make sure that whatever she was doing in the color folders felt like it was on the same emotional feeling that the rest of the UI was bringing. So if we would have, been in two separate areas and not been talking to each other, and she draws like a super hot pink color, and then you slap that into this like calming experience, like then it basically detracts everything that you just work so hard. Even though there's nothing wrong with hot pink, I use it very often. My daughter loves it.
Lindsay loves it too.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So, we had to kind of talk to each other. And the original yellow folder was something that I had worked on about 4 years ago now. And, coming up with that perfect yellow that made sure it invoked Microsoft, like we have ownership over that yellow. And so how do we translate that into other colors is like very hard. And Lindsay did it very successfully, so that when that legacy yellow is in there, the rest of the palette just feels very natural. And even when you're changing between a tint and the shade, like it feels like it's this like very calming experience. Like nothing, it's like when you walk outside, like all the colors of the world just kind of work together, and you don't really know how that works because like you put a brown next to like a blue and it just works. Like that's exactly how this feels. Everything just kind of really calms, and it just really looks good. And I think the customers are just going to love it.
100%. I get to use, I'm using the color filters already in some of the earlier builds internally. And I didn't think it makes such a big difference in my own organization patterns or whatever. It certainly has. I'm like, every time I create a folder now, it's like, what color should it be? Thank you for this amazing feature and the deep dive behind it.
Yeah, I want to do, Lindsay, I've got one more very like nerdy in the weeds kind of question for you. So obviously we have a number of different folder icons that already showed up in the product, whether there's a file in it, whether there's a video in it, and so on. These different, small icons that show up. Did we just like take our existing icons and multiply by 16, one for each color? Like, what was the process of implementing that like?
No, and I'm so glad we didn't, because that would have been a lot of work for me to create a bunch of different, that would have been hundreds, maybe thousands of static SVGs that we would have to upload, between all the different sizes and the different types and all the colors. So no, instead, we have a small set of dynamic SVGs that scale to the different sizes. And then Jake, our amazing engineer, he figured out a way to change the color in CSS directly. So it saved a lot of time for me. And it's also improving it's better for performance as well.
That's awesome. I'm always reminded of I think it was Bill Gates who said, like he wants engineers that are lazy, productively lazy, something along those lines. Like a lazy engineer will find the easiest way to do something. And yeah, not creating thousands of different icons, I imagine, was quite the motivation to find a better way to do this.
I was very grateful that we figured out a way to do that. Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you to Lindsay and Weimer for joining us today. This was an awesome talk. I mean, I love design. I'm not good at it, but I appreciate good design. And I think most of the world is sort of like that as well. So it was great to hear these types of insights and to hear about the care that went into creating this new experience that's coming to everyone over the next couple months. So with that, how can people find you and learn more about you?
Oh man, I feel bad saying it. I'm kind of like I don't have social media. And
just go walk around Ohio and look you up. I love it.
This is where I'm at. Find out more about me at Microsoft, or come to Valley View, Ohio, and we'll get some lunch.
Yeah. I think the key, if you've got questions for Weimer, you send it to the OneDrive Twitter, send it to Arvind or I. We will be more than happy to bug Weimer in his small town.
Yeah, exactly. And, just wander.
Hook it all up. Lindsay, what about you? Anywhere people can find you?
I'm a ghost as well. I do have some socials, but I I don't really check it these days anymore. But I do have LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn if you want to find me there.
Fantastic. If you want to learn more about OneDrive and the latest and greatest, you can check out our blog at aka.ms/OneDrive/blog. As we alluded to earlier, Weimer and Lindsay, you both have kind of penned a blog talking about these exact topics, the visual refresh, the colored folders. And if you want to see what all of that looks like in blog form, or just in any form, really excited for that. I don't know if it's going to go up before the podcast, after the podcast, but check out the blog. If you want to find me, you can find me at linkedin.com/in/srice08. You can also find me on Threads now because Threads is a thing, and this is our first episode post Threads, but I'm at MSFT Steven. And then I mentioned earlier that I do a Star Wars podcast. I normally try not to mention it every time because I would just do that, but we literally review Star Wars television shows. So if you want to go back and listen to our reviews of Andor, or if you're interested in hearing our reviews of Ahsoka, that is the Ion Canon podcast, because it's, the Ion Canon from Star Wars, and because we have our eye on the canon of Star Wars. And we thought that pun was very clever. What about you, Arvind?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn at /Arvind Mishra, the number 1, and also on Threads, because whatever Steven does, I got to follow him. And so I'm at Arvind Mishra 007. So as always, our listening audience, we love hearing from you. You can reach us on Twitter at OneDrive. And if you've got a question, just tag it up with #SyncUp. We actually got our first listener question recently. We're so excited. Thank you. Keep sending them in. And we're going to be bringing that up in a future episode coming up real soon. If you need more, you can visit our page for links, resources, and more at aka.ms/syncup.
Thank you again to Lisa for helping us put this podcast together, making it possible. Don't forget to subscribe to Sync Up wherever you get your podcast. If you enjoy Sync Up, if you find it useful, tell your friends. Word of mouth is the best way to get people engaged and help us grow the show. If you're curious about other Microsoft podcasts, you should check out aka.ms/Microsoft/podcasts.
Thank you for listening to Sync Up. We've been your hosts, Stephen and Arvind, and we'll catch up with you next month. Thanks.